My name's Ethan. I'm 26. And my family told everyone I was dead. That sounds like a headline someone writes to grab clicks. But where I grew up, it was air ordinary. Invisible, until a window finally opened and the cold got in. For as long as I remember, the air in our house tilted toward my twin sister, Lila. She was the golden child, lit from the right angle in every photo, cushioned by benefit of the doubt. I don't mean cartoon favoritism. I mean chosen. Chosen is different. It means when the world can't be made smooth, someone else gets sandpapered instead. When we were 6, our parents, Daniel and Karen, drove us to Grandpa Walter's place for 2 magical weeks. I can still hear the way Mom sang the phrase from the front seat. Lila wiggled in her booster and asked if we'd feed the ducks. I watched my face in the side view mirror. A small shape warped by sky. I told myself, maybe this time it'll be even. No charts on the fridge that bend toward her. No careful explanations about how we're not made of money. Just a summer with Grandpa. The pattern had started long before that car ride. Kids measure love with what they're given when no one's handing out rulers. On my 7th birthday, Lila unwrapped a remote control drone. Dad bragged about snagging a deal for $120. My box held a 1,000-piece lighthouse puzzle with the pharmacy sticker still on it. $12. 99. You love puzzles. Mom said, true, but you can love something and still know its price. That spring, our class went to the Science Museum. The permission slip was $35. Lila's envelope was sealed that afternoon. Mine sat on the counter tacky with jam until Dad sighed and pushed over 3 crumpled 10s and a 5. We're not made of money. Champ. Lila came home with a new museum hoodie. Then the playground accident, I cracked a tooth on the wobbly bridge. The urgent care copay was $60. We didn't go. You'll be fine, Mom said, pressing a cold spoon to my lip while Lila hovered. Dutiful and adored. The tooth went gray for a season. I learned to smile with my mouth closed. And still, I loved them. Love, when you're a kid, is a loyal dog that waits by the door even when nobody comes home. I flipped pancakes for Lila on Sundays because she always burned them. We built blanket forts that stole every chair in the kitchen. I showed her Orion in winter. She once gave me her last gummy bear yellow, the kind she hated, and I wore it like a medal. I divided the world into 2 columns, things that proved they loved me, and things that didn't mean anything if you squinted. Grandpa's house smelled like coffee and motor oil. He kept a mustard yellow towel on the oven handle that somehow always had a tiny dried smear in one corner. No matter how hard he scrubbed. The first night he said, "You 2 are big enough to help me pick tomatoes?" And Lila asked to wear his straw hat. He set it on her head like a crown, and I laughed when it slid over her eyes. You never know which details you'll carry forever. The chuckle in his throat. The weight of that hat. The warmth of tomatoes in your palms. Small human things anchor you when the big things let go. 2 weeks went by. I made a paper chain. Tearing off a loop each morning toward the day, Dad would pull into the gravel drive. Arm hanging out the window. Radio up. When the chain ran out, I made another without telling anyone. The days were full eggs to collect. Weeds to pull. A chart of chores, Grandpa taped to the pantry. We were both with him, both. Which matters falling into a routine that felt ordinary from the outside. On a heavy August evening, just before school would have started, the routine tore. Headlights washed over the kitchen. The clock read 9:17. Daniel and Karen stepped in with the rushed brightness people use when they've already decided something. Quick trip. Mom said, Lila has an early appointment. Pediatric specialist. You know how it is. Lila looked from them to us. A question caught in her mouth. Grandpa wiped his hands on that yellow towel. It's late, he said. Make it in the morning. Daniel's jaw went to that firm place. It's booked, he said, unfolding a paper from his pocket and putting it on the table like a card he'd been waiting to play. The header had the county's crest. Temporary custody arrangement for summer placement. He read, We're within our rights. Grandpa didn't take the paper. Rights aren't the same as right, he said. Mom crouched to Lila's height. Sweetheart, grab your backpack, she said. Then to me, 2. Brazy Ethan. You'll stay and help Grandpa for a few days. You're my big helper. She said it like a treat. A promotion you should be grateful for. My stomach dropped. Lila stood in the doorway with the straw hat in her hands, as if she'd picked up the crown and wasn't sure who it fit. Can't we both come? I asked. No one answered me. Which is an answer. They left in a wash of taillights and promise. 3 days. Tops. The kitchen felt larger than it had been a minute before. Grandpa put a hand on my shoulder. We'll call in the morning, he said. Which is what you say when you've decided not to scare a child at 9:30 p.m. 3 days stretched. We called. Voicemail. We called again. Scheduling is crazy. We'll figure it out, Daniel said once. The kind of sentence designed to end a conversation. Grandpa's messages got shorter, then less hopeful. I kept adding links to a new paper chain and tearing them away each dawn until the loop pile looked like confetti from a party nobody attended. A week later, Grandpa took me outside at sunset. The sky was chalk pink. Dish noises came through the screen. Phantom noises, now that the house had one less chair pulled out at the table. He rubbed his hands together like he was cold, though. It was August. Bud, he said gently, I need to tell you something you won't like. He'd been to the county office. He'd talked to a clerk who spoke in policy and not in grief. On paper, the summer placement was labeled joint. And there was a note about a transition to primary residence for one child before the school year. They're not coming back for you, he said. The kindest version of the worst sentence. I asked what that meant. He didn't decorate it. It means you and I will make a life here. It means you're safe. He framed it like a door closing against weather. Inside me, something thin tore with a small sound. I should have known then, but I was 6, that some decisions are made far from the rooms where you live. We told Lila on the phone a few days later. On the first try, the line dropped. On the second, Karen stayed on speaker until Lila said hello and then clicked off. Lila's voice sounded careful, like she was walking on a floor. She'd been told not to scuff. They say it's just better for school. She whispered, that I'll get more structure. She didn't have the words yet, neither did I. I'll call, she promised. And sometimes she did, in snatches that felt supervised. And then less often, and then not at all. Life reset. Grandpa made a savings jar labeled kid stuff and taped the register inside the pantry. So the numbers appeared like small miracles. $5 mowing, Mrs. Hargreaves' lawn. $12 selling a box of old comics. On August 14, funny what sticks, he wrote $200 school clothes fund. I still wore secondhand jeans that fell wrong at the ankle. But he made math feel like care. On Sundays, we dialed Daniel and Karen's number, because routines are the bones of hope. Sometimes an answering machine picked up. Once, months later, a woman's voice that sounded like Mom, if you listen through water, asked, "Who is this?" When I said my name, there was fabric across a mouthpiece. Then a click. I told myself the call dropped. Denial is origami. You fold into cranes. School asked for emergency contacts. Grandpa printed his name in careful block letters and added their address just in case. The envelope came back, stamped undeliverable. He kept it anyway. Like evidence. At the winter concert, Lila wasn't in the second row because our school didn't have her anymore. I clapped for other kids until my palms stung and then went home and helped Grandpa fix a cabinet hinge because it was a problem with an answer. Here's a piece I didn't understand until later. But I'll put it here because it belongs to this chapter. Paperwork can be a story, too. That fall, Grandpa told me there was a stipulation from when my parents moved joint on paper. Complicated in practice. He tried to change it once. Sat across from a legal aid attorney who explained how expensive fair can be. I'll do what I can from this side, he said. Yafset. Sometimes rarely an envelope left our mailbox with a check inside and my parents' names on the line. It's for the kid. He'd mutter. It's supposed to be. I didn't know then that on their end, the forms would one day claim I lived with them part-time. I only knew the way Grandpa's pen shook when he balanced his register and how he straightened his shoulders afterward, like a man refusing to be tired. At 22, I sat by his bed while green lines pulsed across a hospital screen. He joked with the nurse, called her kiddo, though she was my age, and told me to take the toolbox when the time came. You're handy, he said. Don't let anyone talk you out of it. He died in late October, when the tomatoes were gone and the garden cages leaned like tired men. The house was quiet in a new way, not the tilt of attention, but a vacancy, like a chair pushed back after dinner. I built a life because nobody else was going to. The hardware store hired me mornings. A cabinet GUI hired me afternoons. I rented a studio that smelled like incense and old paint and bought a secondhand bike with a squeaky brake. Some nights I dreamed I was still tearing links from a paper chain, waking to find there was nothing at the end because someone had mapped a different route for me years ago. Then, one afternoon, my phone lit with a name I hadn't seen in 20 years. Lila. Not a number. Not unknown, her name. Like a small light turned on in a room I'd boarded up. The message. We need to talk. Hope is a muscle that atrophies. Mine twitched. Sore and suspicious. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself the past was a country where my passport had expired. But my thumb hovered over reply anyway. Somewhere inside, the 6-year-old, who watched taillights bleed across a kitchen wall, looked up, certain the doorbell would ring this time. Somewhere else, the part that learned to read weather off clouds was already listening for a storm. They chose a restaurant with white tablecloths, a valet in a pressed vest, and a wall of wine bottles that looked like a set from a commercial. The hostess said my name in a practiced hush, Ethan, and something flickered in her eyes. The way people look when a note in your file explains you. She led me past couples pretending not to listen to anyone else and stopped at a corner table where Daniel and Karen sat like they were interviewing a candidate they already meant to hire. Lila was between them, shoulders rounded, eyes on the water glass in front of her, as if it could tell her what to do. Daniel stood. There he is, he said, voice warm like a space heater manufactured. Controllable. Karen smiled, the way you smile in a family photo when the photographer says one more. Lila looked up, then down, then up again. She was older. Of course, that's how years work. But I could still see the kid who used to burn pancakes and hand me the yellow gummy bear. She didn't want. I didn't sit. Why now? Daniel did that half laugh. That means he thinks you're being dramatic. Can't a family have dinner? Families can. I said. We didn't. Karen's smile frayed. Please sit. Honey. I sat because standing and not running felt like the bravest thing available. A waiter appeared with water and an air of polite invisibility. I put my hands on the linen so I wouldn't clench them. Karen started. We wanted to talk. About Lila. Daniel said, taking the reins. Lila spoke before either of them could spin it. I'm sick, she said plainly. And the words hit the table like honest coins. It's my liver. Karen's voice softened on the last syllable. She needs a transplant. There's a possibility for a living donor. As her twin, you're likely a strong match. Likely? That word clicked in my head like a latch. Lila kept her eyes on me. I wouldn't ask if there were another way. Daniel slid a neat stack of papers from his folder outcomes. Survival rates? A printout from a hospital website with 3 lines highlighted, the risk is low compared to the benefit, he said. The waiter asked if we wanted to see menus. No one answered. He set them down anyway and drifted away. I didn't touch mine. I have a question, I said, and I made myself look at them one by one. If Lila weren't sick, would you have contacted me? Silence isn't empty. It's loud with choices. Daniel refolded his napkin into a smaller square. Karen's expression arranged itself into something like sorrow. But it didn't have roots. Lila stared at the condensation sliding down her glass. The waiter returned to recite the specials. Oblivious. And left again. I pushed my chair back. I'm not staying. Karen reached out and stopped halfway. Fingers hoving. Ethan. Please. I am not a spare parts cabinet. You forgot in storage? I said. Softer than I felt. I needed you before you needed me. Daniel's jaw tightened. We made mistakes. But Lila's health doesn't fix what you did. I said. And it doesn't obligate me. I turned to Lila. I'm sorry you're going through this. I meant it. But I can't be your first phone call after 2 decades because you need something. I stood. For a heartbeat, I thought Karen would say the exact sentence to untie the knot in my chest. She didn't. She said, "We're family." Like a spell. And it didn't work. Outside. The heat off the sidewalk felt honest. The valet gave me the kind of neutral nod I've come to respect. I walked until the restaurant's glass and polish fell behind me, and the city looked like itself again, messy. Loud. Clear. I should have known that leaving wouldn't end anything. People who write your part for you don't rewrite. They push. The messages started before I got home. Karen sent a paragraph about forgiveness and cycles. Daniel sent logistics names of surgeons. Dates. A note about covering my time off work. Lila's came last. I don't want to take anything from you. I'm scared. If you want to talk to my doctor, I can sign something. I'm sorry about everything I don't know. I stared at her 3 sentences for a long time. Then I put my phone face down on the counter. It buzzed itself across the laminate like a trapped insect. When I didn't reply within the hour, Karen escalated to photos our kindergarten picture with my cowlick defiant, a snapshot of 2 kids feeding ducks, a close-up of my small hand in hers. The captions did the heavy lifting. See, we were once... Daniel left a voicemail in his corporate tone. Time matters here. He spoke as if this were a project stuck because a vendor hadn't returned an email. By morning, my boss, Rosa, waved me into her office at the hardware store. So, she said, a man called pretending to be a doctor. Then he stopped pretending and started insisting. I told him we don't hand out employee numbers. He suggested he was your father. I suggested he send a letter to legal. She slid a sticky note with a phone number across the desk. If this keeps up, we'll make it official. You're not alone here. Thank you, I said, and my voice surprised me by wobbling. Also, if a hospital calls asking for your blood type, I'm hanging up, she said, and the corner of her mouth lifted. That afternoon I went to the library because libraries are where you go when you're outmatched and need facts that don't take sides. I typed living liver donation risk and fell into numbers and cautious language. Recovery times. Complications with bland names that hide sharp teeth. Percentages that are small until they belong to you. I called a transplant center on a national list and reached a patient advocate who sounded like she'd had this conversation before. We don't pressure, she said. Your no is a complete sentence. There's an evaluation process. Social work. Ethics. Urgency is measured by a score. No one needs to be bullied into a decision. Thank you, I said, and meant it. Back home, I opened the blinds and watched the light cross the wall in slow bands. Karen discovered the photo album function on her phone. Daniel discovered capital letters. Lila went quiet. I thought of the paper chains, the tail lights, the way the kitchen felt larger after the door closed behind her when we were 6. On day 3, Karen's messages shifted from coaxing to crisp. It's hard to understand how you can hold on to resentment when a life is at stake. She wrote. Daniel attached a spreadsheet of wait times with yellow highlighter. I pictured him smoothing the printout with the side of his hand. Certain that neat rows could tidy a life. Rosa caught me staring at my phone on my shift and tapped the counter. My brother once tried to borrow money, she said. Uninvited and welcome. I said no. He called me heartless. Then he asked my daughter. I said no for her. 2. Some people only understand boundaries when you pour them in concrete. I'm trying, I said. Try louder. That night, an envelope slid under my apartment door. No return address. Inside a list of support organizations for donors and recipients, a hospital info session schedule, and a handwritten note. You deserve the whole picture. No signature. I felt seen and spooked in equal measure. I told myself I would take a week. Talk to neutral people. Build a map. When you live through a long untruth, you learn to distrust stories that come with pre-written morals. I started writing dates on a pad the night they took Lila, the undeliverable stamp, the years that followed, the call that wasn't dropped, the winter concert with an empty second row, the hospital screen with Grandpa's green lines, the fancy restaurant with the white tablecloth. I wrote question to ask, who decided I was the solution before they decided I was a person. The next morning, I dug the way a person digs when they suddenly realize the past has an attic full of boxes. I searched public posts, scrolled old community pages, followed tags like threads. I found a video in a folder labeled Family Memories Karen in a Park. Wind lifting her hair. Daniel Edhetsu. We come here every year to remember E. Our little angel, she said to the camera. The lens tipped to a flat stone near a line of trees in loving memory. My initial, a date, and on the path beside it, someone had drawn a small star in bright yellow chalk. I paused the video and stared at that star until the light on my wall shifted. The color matched the mustard yellow towel from Grandpa's kitchen in a way that made my chest ache. I called the transplant center again and asked about family pressure. About documentation. If anyone threatens, harasses, or tries to coerce, we document and we intervene. The advocate said, no one is allowed to make you responsible for someone else's care with guilt. What about urgency, I asked. If it's urgent, what does that really look like? There's a score, she said. There are pathways. There's a team. Panic texts aren't the process. I slept badly and woke to a message from an unknown number. I ignored it. It rang again. Voicemail. Then a text. This is Aunt Ruth. Your mother's cousin. Purple cardigan at a Christmas, in a house with a humming refrigerator. You called me Volcano Lady because my hair was big. I have something you should see. My stomach did that slow drop a person feels when an elevator stops 1 inch below the floor. I called her. She answered with my name in a voice like warm gravel. I'm not calling to push you, she said. I'm calling because your grandfather told me. If I'm gone, Ruth will tell the boy the truth. And now he's gone. What truth, I asked. Though some part of me already knew the neighborhood and needed the address. They didn't forget to come back. She said. They decided before you were born to keep one child. They chose which one. They built a story for the rest. She paused and let the words sit. I have copies of things you need to see messages. Posts. A photo of a stone in a park. And paperwork about money. That wasn't where it should have been. I felt the counter under my hand like a rail on a ship. When can we meet? Tomorrow morning, she said. There's a diner with a bell on the door that can do coffee that tastes like coffee. I'll bring what I can carry. And Ethan. Yes. Don't answer their messages tonight. Let them wonder what you know. After we hung up, I stood in the small kitchen and listened to the apartment, breathe pipes ticking, a neighbor's television murmuring through the wall, a car door thumping shut in the street. I thought of Lila's honest 3 sentences. I thought of Karen's captions and Daniel's highlighter. I thought of the chalk star and the towel and the paper chains and how the smallest objects sometimes mark the border between a life you were given and a life you choose. The phone buzzed again on the counter. I didn't turn it over. I pulled a legal pad toward me and wrote in block letters at the top of a new page, my story. Not theirs. Then I drew a line under it and began to list what I would need to hold my ground dates. Screenshots. Copies of copies. The words I would say if I had to say them in front of people who prefer their stories tidy. Outside, the last of the heat broke and the air came in like a promise through the screen. I slept with the window open for the first time in a long time. And the night didn't feel like something to guard against. It felt like a room with a door I could lock from the inside. Aunt Ruth picked a diner with a bell on the door that chimed like an apology every time someone came in late. She sat in the window booth in a purple cardigan that could have been a flag bright. Stubborn. A little unruly. Her coffee was already half gone. Beside her, a canvas tote slumped open, full of paper like a mouth about to speak. I brought what I could carry, she said, tapping the bag. The rest is at home. Copies. I learned to keep originals where people can't misplace them. I slid into the seat across from her. For a second, I saw myself at 6 again. Feet not touching the floor. A straw wrapper coiled like a snake. Now my knees hit the underside of the table. Growing up is just reaching the things that used to be too far. And realizing the important ones still are. Ruth eased a manila envelope onto the table between the salt shaker and the napkin holder. First. This, she said. And her voice went careful, like she was carrying something glass. She pushed a photograph across the laminate 2 newborns in identical striped onesies. A hospital blanket, like a tide beneath both. On the back, in block letters, Someone had written Ethan and Leela and a date. I've seen that one. I said. Grandpa kept a copy. He wasn't supposed to. Ruth said. When your parents moved, your mother asked everyone to delete or return any photos that showed two babies. She said it was too painful. People believe what hurts pretty bad. She set out more a printout of a social post framed by a tasteful black ribbon. Thinking of our angel today. Would have been his 25th. Always with us. A photo of a tiny shoe on a windowsill. Comments stacked under it like candles. You're so strong. Sending love. I recognized Karen's punctuation. Neat. Deliberate. More careful than kind. Where did they say I died, I asked. My voice sounded far away. Like it was crossing an empty gym. Depends who they were talking to. Ruth said. To the neighbors out west. It was a tragic accident at the lake. To Daniel's work friends. Complications after a sudden illness. Short enough to end questions. Sad enough to earn softness. And to family. Ruth's mouth flattened. To me, a lake story. Tears. A casserole. We feed lies with casseroles because we don't know what else to do. The bell over the door chimed. The waitress refilled our coffees without hovering. Ruth pulled out a printed email. The font small and efficient. Subject sensitive. Karen to a cousin. Please don't bring up the twin around Lila. It confuses her and delays healing. Keep any photos with both children off your pages. Thank you for understanding. Ruth looked at me. There's something else. She laid down a photo of a stone marker, half buried in grass. Not a cemetery, more like the edge of a park. Carved words. Generic and loving memory. A first name and my initial. The year they moved. The letters looked freshly cut when the photo was taken. They told close friends there's a place they go for peace. Ruth said. They didn't give directions. A friend sent me this after a walk on what your mother called the anniversary. And, is it real, I asked, hating that the question could even exist. It's a rock with letters. She said. Real rock. Real letters. The story is what gives it gravity. I buttered a piece of toast with a knife that had a nick near the handle and thought of Grandpa's kitchen, the mustard yellow towel. The permanent little smear in the corner he could never wash out. Details anchor you when the big things come loose. A towel. Machalikstar. A sound your house makes when someone closes a door. Ruth took a breath and slid over a stapled packet. This part made me the angriest, she said. Walter showed me because he didn't like secrets around people who do paperwork for a living. Check stubs. Pay to the order of Karen and Daniel. Memo child support. Months marching across 16 years. Some doubled up. Split payment. At the bottom, circled in blue, $47. Ling ling ling. I ran my finger down the dates. The toner left a faint grit on my skin. He sent them this the whole time I lived with him. I said. It wasn't a question. He thought he had to. Ruth said. The stipulation in the move listed joint on paper. He tried to change it once legal aid. A half-hour consult. A blunt estimate he couldn't afford. He told me. It gets to them. That's what matters. Her jaw tensed. But it didn't get to you. How do we know? She slid another sheet across a scan of a court declaration from when I was 12. Karen and Daniel certified that I lived with them part-time. We certify under penalty of perjury. Neat as a pressed shirt. Behind it, a school district household form from their county, 2 adults. 1 minor child. Lila only. To simplify. Ruth quoted dryly. The numbers blurred until they turned into a word in my head. Choice. They chose to leave me with Walter. They chose to keep the money. They chose the sympathy that comes with a tidy tragedy. They chose a stone with letters for a living boy. I spoke to a transplant patient advocate. I said, surprising myself with the pivot. She said urgency isn't measured by panic. It's a score. There's a process. Ethics review. Consent. That means something. Good. Ruth said, people will try to make your body the path of least resistance. You're allowed to resist. Outside. A delivery truck beeped. Someone laughed too loud at the counter. The world continued doing what it does. Uninterested in our pile of paper. Why help me, I asked. Not suspicious. Just needing to know where the floor was. Ruth wrapped both hands around her mug. Because I should have yelled louder when they took Lila at night and called it an appointment, she said. Because I watched them change the story and let politeness win. Because Walter asked me to tell you if he couldn't. And because the truth is the only thing I've seen that stands up by itself. I nodded. The photo of the newborns looked back with that indignant newborn face. Light is too bright. Air is too much. I folded the copies into my backpack, like a parachute I wasn't sure how to use yet. That night, sleep wouldn't stick. I opened my phone and typed my parents' names. Their profiles were easy to find. The curated life scrolled past a fireplace renovation, Lila's graduation in a blue cap, vacations with matching shirts, captions that sounded like press releases about gratitude, threaded between memorial posts. Always on the same date. Smiles that learn to look brave. One read, "Grief doesn't end, it changes shape." Another, "Some losses teach us to love harder." Under them, hearts and angel emojis, and people promising prayers. In a folder called Family Memories, I found the video I half expected and still couldn't believe. Karen in a park. Wind lifting her hair. Daniel beside her. "We come here every year to remember E. Our little angel," she said to the phone. The camera tilted to a flat stone near a stand of trees in loving memory. And on the path, a small chalk star in bright yellow. My chest tightened at the color. Not because it was mine, but because it belonged to a kitchen where love wasn't a performance. The mustard towel. The stain that never left. The sound of Walter's laugh. By morning, Karen had shifted from pleading to precision. "Take the post down," she wrote. Though I hadn't posted anything yet, Daniel followed with a message that used the word defamation, and then "thank you for your discretion in advance." Lila texted, "I don't know what they told you. I don't know what's true. I only know I'm scared and tired of being the reason everyone performs. If you can't help, tell me. If you can, I'll be grateful." I stared at her words until my eyes stung. I wrote back, "I will not be pressured. I will help with information and boundaries. I will not be your solution just because I'm available." She sent back, "Okay." At lunch, I called the transplant center again. If a family is pressuring someone, what happens, I asked. "We document." The advocate said, "We slow down. May involve social work. No one owes a part of themselves. If anyone tells you otherwise, refer them to us." "Is there such a thing as misrepresenting urgency?" I asked. "There's misunderstanding," she said. "Carefully. There's fear. There's also spin. The system has scores and wait lists and multiple pathways. Panic texts are not the process." I thanked her and hung up and felt, for the first time in days, a piece of ground settle under me. The envelope slid under my door at dusk. No return address. Inside, a short note in tidy handwriting, "You deserve the whole picture," and a list of donor divided by recipient support groups. Plus dates for hospital info sessions. No signature. I stood with it in my kitchen, listening to the apartment, breathe pipes ticking. Someone 2 floors down practicing scales. A car door thumping shut. I pinned the schedule to the corkboard by the fridge. Seeing dates set in ink made the noise in my head quiet a notch. Aunt Ruth called the next morning. "One more thing," she said. An email thread about the move. Karen wrote to a friend, "Starting fresh will be good for Lila. It'll be simpler with just one child." She let it sit. "I wanted you to have that sentence." "Thank you," I said. The words felt small for what she'd handed me. I opened a new document and began building a timeline like a carpenter, framing a wall studs every 16 inches. Square. Plum. I wrote the night they came for Lila with a county letter and a promise. The UN deliverable stamp on the envelope. The call that wasn't dropped. The winter concert with an empty second row. The check stubs that made a number big enough to matter, $47. Ling ling ling. The memorial captions next to the messages about a living donor. The timestamps visible. The stone with letters for a boy who wasn't gone. The advocate sentences about consent and scores. I added screenshots with URLs. Metadata. Dates in the corner. I wasn't writing a speech. I was laying out receipts. When the page grew long, I printed it and read it out loud to the empty room. Saying it made the edges sharper and my hands steadier. I slid the printouts into a folder labeled with a marker, "My Story." not theirs. Then I called Rosa and told her I might be stirring up weather online and that I'd understand if she didn't want it near the store. We sell weatherproofing. She said, do what you need to do. If they show up here, Jamal will tap the sign. She meant the paper she'd taped to the counter. No harassment. Staff are humans. I should have expected backlash before relief. People who choreograph their image don't like unplanned light. But the decision had already been made for me years ago. On a hot night when a car door closed and a kitchen felt too large. All I was doing now was refusing to keep their version of the story alive. I set my phone on the table, opened the posting window, and rested my hands on either side of it, the way you brace a board before you cut. Measure twice. Cut once. Brace the frame. Then the bell on the diner door from earlier rang in my mind. And the chalk star flashed yellow. I breathed in. Out. And I began. I didn't post out of rage. I posted like someone fixing a door that never hung square measure twice. Cut once. Brace the frame. I opened with a line as simple as a level on a plank. My name is Ethan. I'm alive. For 20 years, my parents have told people I'm dead. Then I laid out the studs. First, the photo of 2 newborns in striped onesies. Ethan and Lila scrawled on the back with a date. Next, screenshots of memorial captions. Thinking of our angel today? Would have been his 25th. Set beside the most recent texts, urging me to be a living donor. Timestamps visible. Then the clip from the park, the flat stone near the trees, and a small, bright yellow chalk star on the path. I included the county envelope stamped undeliverable. The school form listing 2 adults, 1 minor child, and the scan where my parents swore under penalty of perjury that I lived with them part-time. I added the check stubs that marched across 16 years to $47. Ling ling ling. With the note. My grandfather paid child support to a household I did not live in. He rationed coffee. We wore secondhand. Finally, 1 page from my timeline that spelled out the night they arrived at Grandpa's with a county letter. Set appointment. And took Lila away. I read it twice. Caught a typo. Breathed in. And hit post. For a few minutes, it was just another ripple in a loud river. Then a former neighbor of my parents shared it with, wait, what? A classmate of Lila's tagged 3 people. A local reporter DM'd to ask for an interview. A small blog ran a piece titled, The Twin Who Wasn't a Ghost. By evening, my phone shook on the table like it had swallowed a bee. I ignored the interview requests and watched the thread instead. It wasn't the numbers that got me. It was the replies that arrived sounding like rooms being opened, people describing their own erasures. The long paperwork of being made small. The slow courage it takes to say a different thing in public than the one a family prefers. By morning, the angel audience was waking up, angry that their sympathy had been spent on a lie. A woman I didn't know posted a photo of Karen and her at a charity brunch. The caption, I brought casseroles. I believed you. I feel used. Someone else shared a screenshot of Karen's public comment under an article about resilience, where she wrote a paragraph on enduring loss with grace. The internet is a messy historian, but it keeps receipts. Then came the first wave of messages from my parents. Karen, take it down. Daniel, this is defamatory. A long one from Karen about context and privacy for the family in a difficult time. Another from Daniel claiming I'd caused reputational harm and jeopardized necessary medical support. Lila's message was 3 words that set the whole room inside me listing. Is this true? I sent her the link and wrote, call me when you've read. At 10 amperes. M. Rosa called me into the office at the hardware store. 2 things. She said, hands folded like a referee. 1. If media calls here, our answer is no comment. Email corporate, which does not exist but sounds official. She smiled. 2. If anyone shows up to make a scene. Jamal escorts. We are not a stage. Thank you, I said. And the relief felt like cold water. A man in a ball cap left a box of donuts at the counter with, I saw your post. My brother's adoption story is a knot. Anyway, you're not alone. The kindness came with powdered sugar that looked like sawdust on my hands. I kept working. That's what you do when the internet shakes a building. You straighten shelves and answer questions about wall anchors, because a conversation about the right fastener is friendlier than most arguments about family. Around noon, the front doors banged open together. Just a little too hard to be an accident. Daniel walked in first. Fast and loud. Karen on his shoulder like a shadow that had studied posture. Lila behind them, pale. Small under fluorescent lights. Jamal lifted his chin, spotted the heat, and stepped out from the aisle where we keep mops. Ethan. Daniel called. Voice pitched for an audience. 3 customers in paint pretended to compare brushes and looked straight at us. We need to talk. Rosa spoke before I could. You can do that outside, she said. Calm and sharp. Or in writing. We are his parents, Karen announced. For the room more than for us. Then you know better than to do this here, Rosa said. Daniel lowered his voice the way executives lower their voices when they're about to say something unkind in polite language. You have posted false and harmful allegations, he said to me. And you are putting your sister's health at risk. Lila winced. Dad, this can be resolved with compassion. Karen cut in, reaching for her old script. Take down the post. People are reacting without full context. I provided the context, I said. Dates. Screenshots. Your words. A small crowd gathered in the peculiar way crowds form around a slow, contained crash. Someone angled a phone. Jamal took half a step forward so his shoulder blocked the lens. Karen pivoted to the lever she knew could move bystanders. This isn't fair to Lila, she said. Soft and practiced. You are making her illness a spectacle. Lila stepped between us like she'd been pushed into traffic and decided to stop the car. Stop, she said. Her voice cracked on the P. I read it. I saw the memorial posts. I asked myself why my childhood feels thin in places, and now I know. She turned to her parents. You told me those baby photos were me and a cousin. You said bringing up the twin would confuse me. You made a stone with a letter for a boy who was eating breakfast across town. You didn't just erase him. You rehearsed it. Karen reached out with a mother's hand that had convinced so many rooms before. Sweetheart. Don't. Lila said. And the word was a clean cut. Daniel's face settled into the expression he uses when he thinks the other side is making a scene. Ethan. If you had come to us privately, I did. I said. Louder than I meant to. When I was 7 and the line went dead. When we called on Sundays. When you arrived at night with a county letter and took Lila and called it an appointment, privacy was your weapon. You don't get to keep it now. Jamal nodded to the door. Outside, he said quietly. Or, I call someone with a badge to ask you to leave. In the parking lot, they kept talking to the glass. Like the building itself might go on record. Jamal stood at the threshold with his hands folded. A statue of polite refusal. When the doors finally closed on them, a customer in camel muttered, I just needed drywall anchors. And the whole paint aisle chuckled in relief. That night, a letter arrived via email from a firm I'd never heard of. It accused me of intentional infliction of emotional distress and publicly abandoning a dependent sibling. The phrase sat in the subject line like a dare. I forwarded it to an attorney, a friend of Rosa's knew Maya Patel, who had already messaged to say, if they threaten, call me. She called back within an hour. They filed a complaint, she said. Cheerful in the way people are cheerful when the rules are finally applicable. It's thin. Lots of adjectives. Not a lot of law. We'll file a motion to dismiss first thing and a preservation letter, demanding they keep all communications about you, including the memorial posts and any PR contracts. That usually cools folks off. How long? The filing is immediate. The SWAT might take a beat. Breathe. And Ethan? Yeah. Don't take the post down. You built it like a brief. It's solid. Morning headlines were small but sharp local outlets. A regional site with a question mark that did heavy lifting. Grief for Clout Karen posted a statement on her page asking for privacy during a complex family matter. A phrase that tried to compress 20 years into a cushion. She didn't deny. She didn't acknowledge. She slid sideways. Then Lila posted, black background. White text. No flourish. I was raised to believe I was an only child. I learned yesterday that was false. The grief many of you comforted was a narrative. Ethan is my brother. He does not owe anyone his body or his silence. I support him. Please stop contacting us. I sat down on my kitchen floor and cried the kind of tears that rinse you out instead of drowning you. Maya called after lunch. Dismissed, she said, and I heard the smile. The judge added a line. This court is not a venue for family image management. Also, opposing counsel suddenly wants to resolve this quietly if you remove the post. I won't, I said. Good. If they harass you at work again, we'll file for a restraining order. If they smear you, we respond with receipts. You have plenty. Fallout began without my help. Karen's favorite charity issued a short statement about values and integrity. Daniel's company updated their website. His headshot evaporated. Friends who had once lined the memorial posts with hearts replaced them with quotes about accountability. Some of it was performative. Sure. But even performance has power audiences withdraw. And suddenly the stage is just a floor with lights, no one asked to look into. They tried one more angle, a direct message to Leela. We're on the verge of losing everything. We need you both to help. The word need again. The hinge they kept hanging their door on. Lila replied with a sentence that belonged in a frame. You abandoned him first. Then she texted me. I'm changing my last name. I answered, I'll drive you. She sent the plain red heart. Not the fancy kind. At the store. Rosa taped a sheet behind the counter. No harassment. Staff are humans. She drew a smiley with a square jaw that somehow looked like Jamal. A customer brought a plant in a chipped blue pot. For your window? She said. It likes morning sun and being left alone? I put it on the sill. It leaned toward the light without apology. People asked if I felt vindicated. That word doesn't fit. This wasn't a courtroom win. It was a draft pulled out of a file and read aloud. The air moved. Dust lifted and glittered and settled somewhere more honest. I breathed easier. That was enough. There remained the matter of Lila's health, the thing that had dragged the past into daylight. The hospital moved her through evaluation. Listing. The slow care that runs on checklists. Scores. And patience. I sat with her in a waiting room, arranged like an apology, soft chairs trying to be friendly. A fish tank making promises about calm. She came out with a packet and a tired smile. They're kind, she said. Also bureaucratic. Maybe that's what I need. Maybe that's what we both needed all along, I said. A system that writes things down and checks them twice. On the way home, we ate tacos on a curb. Lila dabbed salsa off her chin and said, I found a paper chain once, in a craft box that wasn't mine. Mom said it was from camp. She folded the napkin into a square. I didn't know what I was holding. You do now? I said. The sun slid low and turned the street mustard for a minute, the exact color of a towel that never came clean. We both saw it and laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was true. That week, the messages from my parents stopped. A friend sent a screenshot of a moving truck outside their house. You can only move so many times before you run out of places that don't know your outline. I didn't cheer. I didn't hate. I made coffee. I watered the plant that liked morning light. I went to work and recommended the right masonry bit to a man building a wall he hoped would stand. I should have known there was one more envelope coming the anonymous file, with bank statements that would make several things click. And later, the letter asking for help. But in this chapter, the thing that needed setting finally set. Their story was no longer the only one in the room. And when I looked in the mirror, the person staring back wasn't a memorial. He was a man who had picked up his own name and said it out loud. Steady as a level held to a wall. A year is a long time, if you count it in small proofs that life goes on coffee grounds scooped in the dark. A bus that shows up when it says it will. A plant that keeps leaning toward the light no matter where you set it. After the judge's note and the posts and the parking lot scene, the story thinned into routine. I worked mornings at the hardware store and afternoons on cabinets. The kind of days that answer you back by becoming shelves and straight doors? Lila focused on staying steady. Her purse collected lab slips and appointment cards like postcards from a country no one plans to visit. Rosa started putting me on the early shift because, she said, I looked like the kind of person who likes the hour when the city is thinking about waking up. She was right. There's mercy in mornings, nobody needs saving, everything just needs doing. The anonymous email arrived at 6-7 amperes. M. On a Tuesday. Subject line. You should see this. No greeting. No signature. An attached PDF named Statements. I didn't open it at the counter. I waited until break and stepped into the alley, where the bakery's warm air mixes with the cold metal smell of the dumpsters. Jamal was out there with his eyes closed. Doing his 5-minute meditation, he lifted a hand without opening them. I sat on a crate, tapped the file, and watched pages fill the screen. Bank statements. 12 months, from accounts I'd never seen. Daniel as primary. Karen authorized. Exact deposits on paydays. Automatic transfers into a savings account labeled Family Emergency. A separate account that grew by small, disciplined amounts for years. No windfall. No lottery. Just choices. Tidy as rows of screws. There were notes in the margins. Which is how I knew the file didn't come from the bank, but from whoever handled the paper after blue pen arrows to recurring PR charges. In the months after my post went wide, a question mark next to a series of payments for counseling Leela. A circle around a check to a memorial fund, with the memo angel. The amounts weren't outrageous. That was the point. The money to pay the urgent care copay when I cracked a tooth had been there. The money for the field trip had been there. The cushion that turns a crisis into an inconvenience had existed. And they'd spent it on being the people they liked to be in public. On page 8, there was a transfer labeled Foundation Retainer dated the week. Karen asked the internet for privacy. Cynicism is an ugly tool. I try not to pick it up. But there I was, holding proof that they were still feeding the story. It wasn't illegal. It was a choice. You good, Jamal asked? Not looking. Reading the end of a book I already know. I said, happy ending. Honest one. I said, that'll do. I forwarded the file to Maya with a note for the folder and texted Aunt Ruth a heads up. She replied with a line that could be carved into a bench. The truth leaves footprints. Then I stocked a palette of paint until my arms hurt. Because sometimes the antidote to information is wait. That night, I told Lila about the statements. We sat on the curb outside her building, where the fire escape sings in B-flat every time someone touches it. Summer air pressed close. She had a blanket around her shoulders anyway. Hospitals had reset her thermostat. So they had money, she said. Not quite a question. They had enough to make different choices. I said. She stared at the asphalt like it might explain something. I used to think we couldn't afford certain things. She said. Then I realized some things were always affordable if they bought us a spotlight. A dress for a banquet. A trip where I smiled beside Mom, and people told her she was brave. She tucked the blanket tighter. I don't want to buy anything with that kind of currency again. We sat quiet a while. A train moaned far off. The low note that slides under the city's noise. Leela said, I booked the court date to change my name. Next Thursday. 10 o'clock. I'll drive. I said. She nodded. I picked Walter. She said. And the way she said it turned the night gentler. The hearing took 9 minutes. The judge had a cello voice and an expression that said she'd seen every version of people trying to become and unbecome each other on paper. Lila raised her hand. Answered questions. Signed twice. Done. We walked out into sunlight that felt like a clean kitchen floor. Ordinary. Shining. At the DMV, her new license, printed in a machine that coughed like a polite smoker. Leela Walter. We celebrated with milkshakes at a place near the courthouse with red vinyl stools and a register that still rings a bell. She ordered vanilla. I ordered chocolate. We tapped the cups like kids and laughed at ourselves. It wasn't a big laugh. It had roots. The final letter from Daniel and Karen arrived 2 months later in a familiar tidy script. Plain envelope. No return address. I stood in my kitchen with a citrus peeler in my hand and considered pitching it. Instead, I slid it open because unanswered things have a way of rattling. Dear Ethan. It began. Like a stranger. Then, the pitch. We are in a difficult position. We have been cut off by friends, misled by your posts. Daniel's employment has changed. We are asking for help, a short-term loan. We will repay you. Family should help family. The word family sat on the page like a coat they wanted me to try on again. I set the letter down and made coffee. The percolator sighing, the way Walters used to. I washed 3 dishes left from last night. Then I sat and wrote a reply. I didn't intend to send. Dear Karen and Daniel, you are asking for help from the person you insisted was dead. You are asking for help from the child you left on a porch with a bag and a promise you never kept. You are asking for help while ignoring the $47,000 labeled child support that did not reach the child it named. Help grows where truth is planted. You shows different soil. I hope you find a way to live with the harvest. Ethan. I slid the unsent letter into a folder with the rest copies. Timelines. The still of the chalk star. The envelope, stamped undeliverable. The scan where they swore, I lived with them part-time. Not everything needs an answer you send. Some answers are in the act of not mailing. People asked if my parents were dead to me. I understand the figure of speech. But language matters. I don't wish anyone gone. I've learned there's a difference between not wishing someone harm and not inviting them back. You can keep the door closed without setting a fire. You can build a fence and still mow the strip of grass on your side. Lila's health settled into a truce that had to be renewed every week. She got listed. The hospital had its machinery scores. Labs. Imaging. Appointments that start late and end later. I sat with her in a waiting room built to be gentle, soft chairs. A fish tank. A bulletin board with photos of staff and their dogs. A kid pushed a plastic truck across the carpet with the focus of a surgeon. A mother scrolled her phone with the focus of someone holding herself together with both hands. Lila came out with brochures and an exhausted smile. They're kind, she said. Also bureaucratic. It's weird that I find that comforting. Same. I said. I used to think paperwork was the enemy. Now I think it just wants us to write the truth down. On Sunday mornings, we started a ritual, even when she felt lousy pancakes badly flipped. Syrup passed across the table like a baton. We kept the window open in all weather. It made the room feel honest. We told small stories a customer who insisted we carried left-handed hammers. The angle I finally found to rehang an old door so it didn't swing on its own. A book she liked where the hero doesn't win so much as endure. Sometimes we talked about the past, like it was a town we moved away from. Sometimes we didn't. Both felt like progress. Rosa taped a sign behind the register, no harassment. Staff are humans. She drew a smiley with square shoulders that looked like Jamal. A customer brought a plant in a chipped blue pot. For your window, she said. It likes morning sun and being left alone. It thrived. When I repotted it, the roots were bound in a perfect circle. Rosa said, loosen them, or they'll keep growing in the old pattern and choke themselves. I teased the knots apart with my thumbs and thought about names and courts and the muscles we train when we say no and yes on purpose. On the anniversary of the night, headlights cut across Walter's kitchen, and a promise became a plan. I went to the park from the video. I didn't expect the rock to be there after the press and the posts. But it was half sunk. Letter dulled. Someone had left wildflowers in a jar, which felt like the world trying to do something kind with incomplete information. I stood a minute. The grief that arrived wasn't for the boy I didn't get to be. It was for the years spent proving I was here. A chore no one should have to do. I took a piece of chalk from my pocket and drew a star on the path, not on the stone. Bright yellow. A small reclaiming that didn't require stealing anything back. A kid on a scooter rolled up. Cool star, he said. Thanks, I said. Is it for someone? For a truth, I said. He nodded like that, made perfect sense and pushed off. 1 foot strong. 1 foot steering. The last note from Karen and Daniel came by email months later. After a friend of a friend mentioned seeing their house emptied into a truck. It said they were starting over. That they hoped someday we can heal this. That we only did what we thought was best. It also said, we are broke. I didn't reply. Aunt Ruth said, not replying is a reply. She sent me a recipe she'd found in Walter's handwriting, folded inside an old tax folder pot roast with 3 secret additions underlined twice. He'd kept family and numbers in the same drawers. It makes sense to me now. Both are versions of accountability. People still message me, some to argue, most to thank. I don't have a speech for them. I say keep copies, put dates on a line, name what happened. Let your no be a sentence. Let your yes be earned. I say you don't have to carry someone else's performance. I say set the hinge right and the door will close without slamming. One evening, Lila texted a photo of her new ID with the Walter name and a caption, look, I fit in my own life. I sent back a photo of a towel I'd bought that matched the mustard color from Walter's kitchen as close as memory could make it. It already had a small stain on the corner. No amount of scrubbing would take out. Some marks belong. I typed. She replied with a laughing face, and I can almost smell the tomatoes. I poured coffee into 2 mugs and set one by the window where the plant leaned toward the glass like it wanted a better view. Outside, a bus sighed at a stop and shouldered into the night. Somewhere in the building, someone practiced scales. Somewhere on our street, someone counted links on a paper chain. I wanted to tell that kid this. When you reach the end and there's no car in the driveway, you will build another kind of countdown. It looks like this: say the next right, no. Say the next right, yes. Keep your records, fix what you can fix, let the rest go out with the trash on Thursday. A year after the email with bank statements, Maya sent a short note FYI. No filings. No noisy. Rosa added more morning shifts to my schedule with a wink. Justice is best served before noon. Jamal taught me the breathing trick that makes the world slow a notch. Aunt Ruth mailed me a photo from an old album of Walter in his straw hat, grinning like he just pulled a rabbit from a carburetor. Lila texted after an appointment. Stable today. I wrote back good. Pancake Sunday, she said. Always. I don't think the universe balances ledgers. I do think we can build small economies of care that outlast storms, plants that like being left alone. Towels that keep their stain. Windows we open, even in winter, to prove the air can still get in. In that economy, truth is tender but stubborn. Like a seed pushing at hard ground. Give it time and light and a little water. And one morning, you notice it has become a thing with roots. You touch it, and it doesn't tip over. You exhale. You put the kettle on. You call your sister by the name she chose. And she answers from the kitchen she's learning to love. And for once, finally, no one needs to invent a story to make any of it mean more than it already does.